Well, I do think the dudes keep it in the car. Yeah. I keep it on the desk. I'm going to be gone before I get out. It's rare that I remember. I need my wife to make sure that you walk up to me to go and give her it's Steve Chandler. Like this. Good. I'll just tell people to do that. I knew when I was grabbing my notebook, there's one other thing I need to bring. He says he keeps one in the truck. Well, I was just going to say, wear it all the time. Well, I was walking the dog this morning, which is one of my best marketing tools. Walking the dog, and some guy running inside. Hey, can you help me? My dad is moving up here from Montgomery. He needs a house. My dog is one of my best marketing tools. Get a unique looking dog. Not everybody. Yeah, they know me by the dog. Oh, there you go. That's good. Just fine. It's good. There was a little discussion last meeting about data centers. Just side of town.
I can answer a lot. I got a lot of
Currently, everybody I think everybody's small, for example. Now we have to the zoo. I know other people. I don't feel that. On my list, I'm one person probably.
that was just cheaper. I mean, that one, that is literally like a beach to like, that's the president. It's usually it's called the president. It's rare that I would have mentioned it to me or kind of back of my mind. Somebody else.
It's part of the resident.
I think but I think it's better instead of establishing that. I think you're better off just doing it here. Just going if it's working out.
They call it well, it's dead. We've had their intervention. That's my grass work. Grass work.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was at Minneapolis.
What's wrong with the Bachelor Capital?
Well, I feel like they want to say they want to come back to that. My sister just loves Vegas for some reason. It was actually fun.
My bachelor party was in Vegas.
Really?
25 years ago.
You can grab one of those mics.
Yeah.
Very
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's good to figure this out right now, I guess, right? Check, check, hello. Yeah. Is it on? Can you hear it? You can?
I hear you. I don't know.
Check this out. Could just be a battery on this one, or maybe grab one of the other ones. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jaron Springer. I'm the CEO here at Greater Nashville REALTORS. It's a pleasure to have you all here today to see the state of housing, which is we're hosting along with Axios Media. Nate Rouse here today to be a part of this and be a moderator of this. Obviously, housing is a subject that's hit on every day in Nashville, and so it's important for us as a mission and vision of this organization is raising the bar of professionalism for our members, but also being a trusted voice within the communities that those members are serving. And so we do that in a lot of different ways, but the way we're doing that today is getting this information out to you all and having a dialogue between Councilmember Allen. So we've got a great public servant representing that work that's so important, the legislative process to our community. Sean Cheriotti, a respected broker within our membership that is very engaged in the association and knows the housing market, and Dr. Marat Arik, who's with NTSU and has been a partner with Greater Nashville REALTORS for a number of years. We've worked with NTSU in a variety of ways, and I know that he's got that great economic research and data behind him that he's going to bring to the table today. So a great variety of panel members. I'm going to hand it over to Nate now. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a great experience with us today.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and get started when we figure out the technology. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nate Rao. I'm a reporter, as Jaron said, with Axios Nashville. Just to introduce myself really briefly, for those of you who don't read Axios, I've been a reporter in Nashville, or journalist in Nashville, since 2002, and I've been covering metro government in some form since December 2007. So a long time. The first Metro Council vote, just to date myself a little bit, that I ever covered was the Bridgestone lease to keep the National Predators in town. And for this room, the first major land use decision I ever covered was Maytown Center. Does anybody remember the Maytown Center debate? It would have been our second downtown, but instead it stayed at Bell's Benedict's. One thing I learned in my 20 years as a reporter is that journalists get asked to do a lot of panels. And full disclosure, I almost always say no to them. It's not necessarily my thing. I said yes to this one for two reasons. One, Blake Stewart asked me to do it. He's one of my absolute favorite people in my job on a daily basis with Greater Nashville REALTORS. And the second reason is housing, and affordable housing specifically, has become the most pervasive issue I have ever seen in Nashville politics. Every political conversation I have, it comes back to housing. Almost every story that my colleague Adam Adam Chamberlain, who's here and I write about, comes back to housing, and it's really unlike anything that I've ever seen. So I was just curious to hear this panel of experts that Blake asked to join us today, to hear their expertise and to hear their thoughts on where things stand, where they're going, and to just pick their brains. So I guess we could start there. Could each of you all introduce yourself and maybe just a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you. Sean Charioti, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Reliant Realty. I'm also the Principal Broker for our Nashville office, and this is my 19th year licensed as a real estate agent. So definitely relate to this audience for sure. Born and raised in Nashville, actually got my undergraduate degree from MTSU, then got my MBA from Belmont, and yeah, been in this market for a long time, seeing the peaks and valleys that we've been experiencing in recent memory, and just excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm Berkeley Allen. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but Metro Council member for the past 15 years. I moved to Nashville in 1982 and paid $125,000 for my first house. And it just astounded at what it now costs a young family to try to figure the house of their own. And as David said, every single council meeting we have involves some kind of statement about the unattainable cost of housing. So it's something that we just continue to accelerate to be the top issue that we're dealing with.
Morning. Excuse me. I am Ratnavik. I am with MTSU actually 23 years. I have kind of several hats actually. I teach strategic management at the management department. I oversee research center, business and economic research center at MTSU, and I am also the chairholder for urban and regional planning. So I have different hats and all related to what you are doing actually. It's housing market, real estate, construction, and policy related issues. And thank you for having me here.
So this panel is tied to the release of the mid-year housing numbers, and if y'all haven't seen them yet, the data shows that number of closings are up slightly, the median home value is up slightly, but there are also some worrying numbers in there, the number of days that a house is listed on the market being one of them. And so just with those numbers as a backdrop, but really relying more on your expertise, do you feel like the Nashville area is in an affordable housing crisis right now? We can start here.
Well, I think I might get kicked out if I say no. I think yes. Succinctly, there is, particularly as you see the delineation of value from standing on Broadway and drawing a circle out into the greater metro area. Certainly, there is a dire need for affordable housing. You're seeing a lot of strain on homeowners who have lived in these areas for decades with increasing property taxes. So yes is the short answer. I know we're going to get more into this. So
I'll just repeat what I said is every single council meeting, sometimes for hours at a time, we hear the public coming to us and saying, either we need higher wages, which as we talked about in the kitchen, or we need to remove some of the obstacles that are making it hard to just build a small, inexpensive house.
If I could interject, was there a tipping point though that affordability and housing became more front and center for you?
It seems like 2015 is the year when we hired the first out-of-town expert to come and do a study and to give us a suggestion on how we could make things more affordable, and it just seems to have been gotten worse every year.
And then post-pandemic as well, obviously.
And yeah, kind of the whole phenomenon of, we were talking about in the kitchen about the houses being, when interest rates were zero, even if you wanted a house, you had to offer cash for it and you had to offer above the asking price. So again, the citizens of Nashville who just want a place to live were competing with somebody with cheap money that just wanted to build something bigger. which those sell too, so apparently we need those as well, but it just seems to have been a lot of confounding factors.
Dr. Reed?
You know, from the way I look at actually, it's, we are currently moving into affordability challenge rather than crisis. You know, so, when you look at indicators, you can see so many things moving in the direction that still we have a problem, but it's not as big as what we used to have in the last, several years. That between, post-pandemic era and 2025. But there's really a challenge that, needs to be addressed.
One perspective I have working at Axios is we have newsletters in most major cities in the country, and the same issues facing Nashville are facing all of our sister cities, Raleigh and Charlotte and Tampa and Austin, etc. What are those kind of macro issues that are creating this problem across the country?
Well, I mean, obviously, you can't turn the faucet off of Nashville, right? You have a lot of industry moving here, a lot of people moving here, which is keeping that demand in place, regardless of, global economic factors and inflation and all those kinds of things. I will say, affordable housing, creating more affordable housing, let's say, invokes, usually new construction, right? Finding areas of town where you can build. Well, material cost is up, labor cost is up, right? So the inflation is also, I'm not saying there aren't developers from out of state that aren't trying to take advantage of Nashville in that area for profit, absolutely. But even for the local builders, they're seeing challenges as well to be able to pass along affordability, so to speak, to that consumer. So it's, it's multifaceted, if I can say it that way. It's not just falling on the consumer, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there are, different kind of drivers for those kind of challenges, as Sean had mentioned. From the, of course, buyer side, you've seen the significant, the cost-related, the interest-related actual elements. And the seller side, again, locking interest rate, it's very low. It's unbelievable. They don't want to lose their homes unless they get a really decent offer. So it's just they are not going to the market or looking for different opportunities because the gap is so big. And of course, the builders, they are having all kind of workforce challenges, rising costs of materials and all those elements. And when you look at those big cities, actually, you could see those kind of challenges all over those cities. But the challenge is everywhere right now. Those, especially cost-related challenges, interest rate-related challenges. When you look at the nation, you're going to see everywhere those kind of things going on.
And I know everybody's seen the chart that shows, how many households get built, or how many homes get built and how many households get created. And in 2008, those two lines crossed each other, and for the first time, we're not building more houses than households are being created.
Dr. Reed, I wanted to drill down on our local economy with you real fast. What does the state of our housing market say about the Nashville area economy, and what, just kind of zooming out beyond housing, how would you describe where we are economically in the region right now?
In terms of the overall economy, actually, we are growing, but we are growing slowly. It's not really as fast as what we used to. And in terms of the housing market, we have, as I said, we have a real challenge. It's not quite a real challenge, but when you look at the Nashville area, the counties, you don't have one single housing market. In fact, at the regional level, of course, you need to coordinate because the commuting, many other elements, affecting every single county. But when you look at those counties making up the Nashville MSA area, each one has different kind of problems and the dynamics. Here in Nashville, we still attract in this area. If you look at the map, I'm in Tennessee, we have 95 counties, and look at the population dynamics. You're gonna see 5 or 6 counties here, Davidson, Wilson, Sumner, Rutherford. Those are the key counties attracting population here. And Davidson itself is just about 10,000 people, it's a net population growth every single year. And you have a huge inflow of people still coming here. And that itself is creating huge demand for pressure on the housing related challenges and issues. And the other thing is, it's in Nashville, it's a kind of very interesting dynamic. I mean, if you look at the median prices, still going up. I mean, it's like $5.50 or something like that. It's incredible number. Not everyone can afford. But if you look at also some other dynamics, it's just kind of, we are not going to see any kind of slowdown in the growth in that area, because 1/3 in Nashville area is a cash price, your cash purchase. It's incredible. As long as you have that one, you're going to have business there. And it's going to push the prices up. And what's going to happen then, you're going to have a big problem for the certain segments of the population. They are already priced out. But you're going to have long commutes, it's a traffic jam, accidents on the highways. It's an unbelievable, implication of, it's a dynamic economy, the challenges with housing, pushing the workforce out, and it's kind of very interesting dynamics going on right now, I said. But overall, the economy is growing, but growing slow.
Councilmember, as you said, this has been a topic that council in particular has been tackling, head on. Can you talk about some of the new policies the council has approved over the last year or so? We have the unified housing strategy as well as legislation that's been passed to address this.
Yeah, so I'll just, a little bit of background, everybody probably knows this, but whenever a new project is proposed that's going to add density, the local community would always come forward and say, well, we support new housing, but the infrastructure is not there to support it. We don't have, the roads aren't wide enough. We don't have the mass transit we need. Who knows about water storms and those kinds of things. And so the council commissioned a housing and infrastructure study, and then at the same time, Director Hubbard was working on the unified housing strategy. So we kind of had those two documents produced, and both of those have kind of laid out a ground plan for trying to make the ground easier to solve those issues. So the housing and infrastructure study recommended 40 pieces of legislation, which we sort of tagged as missing middle to kind of fill in some of the types of housing that we don't have enough of in here. And so one created these two new zoning districts, RN and RL, that essentially allow homes and townhomes for RN and homes, townhomes, and small apartments in RL, kind of in transition areas where we would go from the single-family homes that seems to be the bread and butter of what so many neighborhoods want to see built everywhere, and the acknowledgement that if we got good transit on corridors, it just makes sense to up that density some. And so those two pieces were put in place, and then we passed a bill that made it simpler to build duplexes without, there were some weird things in there about when the property was platted and things like that, and that was all wiped out, which was good. So and then the third one allowed detached accessory dwelling units anywhere inside the urban services district. We'd kind of gone to that step. I worked on legislation to create a DADU overlay, so that if a group of neighbors said, yes, we're zoned to RS, residential single family, largely because everybody was kind of scared of the tall skinnies that were coming through. So people were downzoned the neighborhoods to RS. But that precludes the possibility of just putting a mother-in-law cottage in the back. So we created this overlay kind of as a stick your toe in and let's try this out idea, to allow some neighborhoods to say, we're just going to draw a circle around all the neighbors that back up to each other and say, we're fine if there are backyards that have these houses in them. And that moved slowly and created some that all the literature that you read says that the mother-in-law cottage are an important part of it. So we now said, if you're in the urban services district, which is the area with streetlights and sidewalks, you can have it 80. If you're in the general services district, you can now use that overlay tool to create the possibility of day use there. And then the final piece of legislation built on some state enabling legislation that allows us to have an attainable housing designation. That's their language, but essentially it just means reasonably priced, affordable relative to the area median income. And again, because there was a lot of community pushback, I'm sure y'all were all participating in some of those processes of these 4 bills as a group. So we tried to proceed in steps, and sort of as people go, oh, you know, the sky doesn't fall when we do this, then maybe we'll move to the next step. So right now, that attainable housing bill will allow an extra 2 stories by right if you provide voluntarily a certain percentage of affordably priced houses based on 80% of the area median income. That currently is only allowed in the RL zoning, which is the one that is the slightly more dense, that would allow houses, townhomes, and small apartment buildings. And to my knowledge, there aren't any RLs yet. We have one bill coming through that's got our first RN coming up. So we're still adjusting to that and implementing those pieces. And my hope is that I'd love to get feedback from this group of, you know, if y'all are seeing that suite of bills making a difference yet in what you're seeing on the market, because it hadn't been but a couple of months since we passed it.
So just so I understand, it's an opt-in to the RN and RL?
It is a rezoning in appropriate places similar to an SP, specific plan. And so if you're close enough to transit, because that's kind of a key piece of it, where it makes sense to add that density, the owner of a piece of property would say, I would like to rezone this piece of property or these 4 pieces of property to RN, and that will enable me to build now townhomes here where I've been before. But initially people thought, oh, well, they're just gonna draw a map and say, here are all the places in town that are RN and RL. But I think just in an effort to walk this through slowly enough that people would buy into it and try to emphasize, it's now happening one lot at a time. So go for it.
And I guess I'm interested, like, in just the word on the street. When I was first starting to cover Metro, I remember you had like the pro-neighborhood versus pro-growth crowd. That was almost like the political parties in Nashville. What is that changing? Are your kind of rank and file neighborhood leaders, the community folks you hear from, are they more receptive to more density?
I think it's an issue of some degree of education, some degree of having lived in other cities, especially ones with great transit. People who have been here all their lives, living in a single family home in a lovely wooded neighborhood, don't want to change. And there are certain streets that showed up in full force when we were going through this, saying, save our national neighborhoods, you saw signs.
Right.
So it kind of depends on what part of town you're in. I mean, I think East Nashville and WeHo, certainly, those areas are saying, bring it on. Kind of the Hillsborough West End neighborhood is they're open to it, except they always, bring back the transit issue. And then there's some neighborhoods that are just going, no way, no how, single family is the only way that we should be doing this. So that tension still very much exists.
Yeah, I went to the Creve Hall meeting. It wasn't pitchforks and torches, but people were definitely worked in.
There's emotion.
Should have been at the Hampton Avenue meeting.
Oh, yeah.
That was, you and I sat next to each other. That was pitchforks.
We also have a petri dish for like more aggressive policies in the nations. Could you talk a little bit about what was approved there? And I believe, Sean, am I right that you have a perspective on the upzoning in the nations?
Well, thank goodness you're in your position, because sometimes my eyes cross over hearing some of these zoning overlays and differences, and it's a hard battle, and there's no altruism in growth, right? You're talking about a juxtaposition of ideology where even that same longstanding resident is saying, I want affordability, and then some of this zoning is catering towards affordability, but the caveat is density, and they don't want that. So I think that's the sentiment that I've received from even past clients who are in these neighborhoods, they may even be in an HPR, right? Detached or attached HPR, but then they're saying, well, my neighbor behind me can put 4 houses on this lot. Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, yeah, well, before that time, it was your time, and you purchased one of those. And quite honestly, I live in East Nashville, and it butts right up to Inglewood, and, the longstanding residents there, right? We don't want tall cities, there's too many HPRs, look at all these cookie cutter homes, they all look the same. And it's like, yeah, well, in the 50s, someone put 10,000 brick ranch homes that look identical right next to each other, right?
And they were affordable.
And as the crow flies, you're 2 miles from standing on Broadway with a beer in your hand. So you live downtown, whether you like it or not. It might not have been your perspective because, you're on a half-acre lot tucked away in Inglewood. But the reality is that should you have been in another bigger city, you would have already been enveloped into downtown and probably had multi-story commercial around you as well. So it goes back to, what Berkeley said about perspective. It's all about perspective, where you've lived in the past, if you have, where you've moved from. Someone from Chicago is like, I get a yard, I get a blade of grass, awesome. You know what I mean? So it's mindset, it's perspective. I understand all facets of it. I get it.
Could you talk a little bit about the nation specifically and what was it?
Yeah, that was an interesting, you're right, petri dish, just good kind of let's do a pilot and see how this works. And I would say from a planning theory standpoint, the council member did everything right. It makes good sense. He also paid extra attention to trees, which is another thing that the city needs to be mindful of. From a PR standpoint, I think that there was a portion of the neighborhood that got left behind. I think that having online meetings or meetings at a bar, essentially, brings the younger group, and that tends to be the ones that are more open-minded. I will say I have been involved in, this is 10 years ago, historic rezonings that were generated by the neighborhood, and an approach to the council member and said we want to do this, and I think the way to avoid controversy, if you can, it may not, sometimes it's not possible to avoid controversy, but if it's neighborhood driven and they think they thought of it themselves and they go to every single house and invite them to a house party and give them a flyer and a newsletter and take 6 months to lay the groundwork, I think you can make fundamental changes like that in a less controversial way. It'll be interesting again to see how it plays out if the changes happen and people go, oh yeah, the sky's not falling. And actually now there's a coffee shop nearby because we have the density to support it. So that was a really hard one because so many neighbors showed up in opposition, and we passed it anyway because it makes good sense. But it sure is better when you can do it and have buy-in from the majority.
And Dr. Reed, do you have a perspective on whether these policy changes kind of open the faucet more to housing? How much can they move the needle when we have these macro forces working against us?
It's going to be difficult because, again, this is multifaceted. It's so many things affecting the affordability. On the one hand, you have interest rate is very high. It's really difficult for someone to go and afford medium level, in terms of the price, a home with the current interest rate, unless you have really good, decent income and wages out there. So that's extremely at the elevated level, and I don't see any kind of, going down. It's gonna probably go up, given what's going on in the overall, the economy. That's the one aspect, so it's just that on one side we have that huge, financing side. It's gonna dramatically affect, what's going on in the market. The other part is the building cost. It's unrelated to any kind of zoning issue. You may have smaller units, you may have some other things, of course, push the price down, but still, it will be difficult. It's gonna be slow. It's not gonna, definitely it's gonna have an impact, but it's gonna be very slow given what's going on again nationally. Under the market uncertainty and employment, we have also some issues going on. It's significant layoffs, especially at certain professional levels. And it's basically making people pause, rather than going and buying the home, you just wait, rent or move in with the parents. It's the best time. 25 to 35, that's the age group is the highest level currently living with their parents. They are not really going out and, looking for homes or even not willing to rent. So he said there are significant undercurrents going on that affecting the housing market. The zoning and many other things, those are critical, but it's going to take some time to adjust and, get what we want.
I think about this issue a lot in terms of some of my family members. My brother-in-law is a lower Broadway musician, full-time. His wife is a server, and without going too much into their finances, they make pretty good money. I really believe that not long ago, it wouldn't have been a problem for them to find a house. And now they kind of got to the end of the lease and they couldn't find anything. And they ended up moving, not just, they didn't buy a house, so they continued renting, but they moved to Hendersonville where they just got a better deal. What are the barriers? First of all, do you all agree, and Sean, you would know this the best probably, that young homeowner is really the one who's in a tough spot right now? And what are the barriers to homeownership for that first-time buyer?
Yeah, well, the out-of-pocket expenses that are tied to purchasing a home, obviously, there are programs out there for first-time home buyers, and there are incentives, depending on where you look. But yeah, the biggest word I think that we use in our industry when we talk to prospective buyers is trade-offs, right? And unfortunately, the trade-offs are huge for these young homeowners. It's not, the sexy ones, right? Upgraded home, a layout that makes sense or what have you. It's how far am I going to have to drive to my house? These young individuals are starting families, so they want to be close to good school systems. So there are a lot of challenges, especially like Dr. Murat had mentioned, with interest rates being where they are. While historically they're not considered high, our mindset, looks back at the last several years of interest rates, and we surmise that they are, and obviously that affects payment. Most young first-time home buyers are looking at, what is my mortgage payment going to be, right? That's where they lie. When they get with their lender, they're looking at my pre-approval amount relative to what my mortgage payment's going to be. So, and it's not getting easier to get around town. I'm from Hendersonville, and my family would love for me to move back there, but I'm not going to sit in traffic for an hour each way trying to get in and out of town on a good day. I know yesterday, I don't know if anybody traveled that way, but I was listening to the local radio and they said just pull over and take a nap. So it's just getting worse and worse every day. One way in and one way out to a lot of these areas. Conversely, I have to say there are advantages to a market like this for first-time home buyers also, if they are willing to relent on the trade-off of commuting. I'm working with a couple of buyers now who are settled in the low 300s price point, albeit, and more people are working remotely, not having to commute, which, is a benefit to, coming out of COVID and just the general, way that our industries are working now. But I'm seeing excitement from them for where they're capturing some of these homes that are well appointed and not complete disasters that they have to fix up. Just got to drive, unfortunately, if you're going into downtown.
And then at the other end of the spectrum, to give you all a peek behind how this panel works, we got on a Zoom call, kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And one thread that I pulled from you was, you're working with folks who are relocating to Nashville as part of the Starbucks expansion, and they have a completely, almost the opposite, completely different outlook on our housing market. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you know, again, they're coming from, you know, Seattle or, you know, these other major cities, and, you know, I had kind of touched on this earlier. You know, they just look at it as, you know, how far am I from downtown? You know, is it, you know, and so imagine the Ashland City, Whites Creek going up towards Clarksville, for instance. You know, you may think, well, if they work from Starbucks, they must make a lot of money and they're getting relocated. Well, no, I mean, a lot of these individuals, their price points in the 400s, you know, they're also on a budget, so to speak. And so, you know, yeah, we're having these conversations, but they're impervious to maybe our optics to certain areas of town or the stigmas that are tied to them, because they're just looking at, well, how far is it to downtown? And they're like, oh wow, well, I'm used to sitting in traffic for an hour and a half. You're telling me that Whites Creek is, you know, 20 minutes, so to speak, you know, from these areas. So, yeah, they almost don't have all those pre-existing conditions, so to speak, as maybe some other buyers that we're used to working with.
Yeah, I live in Whites Creek, and Whites Creek Pike to Vashti to Cowan is like the secret way into downtown. I think it's less than 20 minutes, almost is. I hope not too many people learn about that. But it actually does make sense. White Street Pike, Ashland City, Clarksville Pike, that's where you could see growth and affordability come online. I'm told they just don't have the infrastructure though.
Yeah, you know, the very old adage, forgive me, I'm not trying to, but you know, it's doctors want to buy houses where their wives can shop, right? So, you know, when you don't have the infrastructure, you know, honestly, Nashville's kind of been operating like this for a long time. We're experiencing growth in the neighborhoods before the retail makes it to the main roads. And that's just, you know, a sign of how much we've been growing. I mean, if you look back at the, you know, 2007, 2008 period, if you look back, you know, the prices of homes kind of stagnated, values stagnated. And it was a sign that Nashville was inundated with growth to hold up those values, you know, and, you know, I think you touched on, we have more sales, median prices going up, but we have longer days on market and more inventory. How weird is that? You know, right? But just one last little thing I want to touch on with these transplants that are moving, you're seeing builders give away a ton of incentives, you know, and new construction isn't for everyone, but that's a conversation I ensure I have with my buyers that are moving here is, are you open to it? Are you open to, you know, discerning what builder you may be comfortable purchasing from, depending on their quality of build and relative to your price point? Because that matters, and especially if they're sensitive about their out-of-pocket expenses, right? You have a builder that's saying, well, you can pretty much come to the table with your down payment, and we'll take care of the rest. That can make sense for a lot of buyers.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you all are on the commercial real estate side, but I challenge you to push more stuff to Whites Creek, because we got a white bison celebrated. White bison and twice daily, and it's like, that's the new headquarters.
I just want to say I have a beautiful Whites Creek listing on 5 acres. You can build on the back 2 acres. It's already allowed. It has an in-ground saltwater pool, heated. Throwing that out there.
I actually stumbled into my next question though, because I wondered are there parts of town, and I know we talked on our Zoom about Antioch and Madison Rivergate, and even zooming out more regionally to Clarksville, are there parts of town, whether it's you're seeing in the data or we're seeing anecdotally, where people are moving to and really looking at differently? Anybody?
I mean, the Montgomery County is, of course, one of the regions attracting most of people. And it's a housing market is a very dynamic, actually, that part of the region. Rutherford is 18 again, so one of the counties housing lots of people, working in Nashville. So it's just creating a tremendous problem, and at the same time, that's one place actually people go right now for the affordability reason. And around here, of course, Williamson County actually is growing tremendously because of the corporate headquarters locations. And as long as we have those elements, actually, it's going to continue to grow. Again, the market is extremely segmented. There's certain people moving to, for example, looking for houses in Williamson County, but certain other groups, professionals, moving out rather than county, even going beyond, like Coffee County, those it's kind of spreading to the region.
Yeah, Adam and I were working on a story about Montgomery County's growth. I don't know if any of you all specialize in that area, but just driving around, the quality of neighborhoods was really great, and the price point. I was really surprised to see that. And they're going to pass or have passed Chattanooga in terms of population. So yeah, Clarksville, Seminole. They need to get a publicist though, because I don't feel like people know about it. And what about Antioch? I feel, descriptively speaking, I feel like people's perspectives on Antioch are changing and really are looking at more positively than they used to.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the optics have changed tremendously over the last several years, and I mean, you're seeing it with, the exit that has the Tanger outlet, Putt Shack, In-N-Out Burger. I mean, these are amenities you would have never thought 10 years ago, would be in those areas. I mean, that's a really good example of maybe some forethought there, and some, I think, desirable new construction neighborhoods that are on the cusp of affordability, if I can put it that way. I've helped a family with 3 kids buy a 3,000 square foot new construction home, and I believe it was under $500,000 in that area. So again, affordability is relative. I understand that, but Antioch. You mentioned Madison. There's a lot of master planning going on there. I don't know if they're still intending on trying to tie in Neely's Bend into an exit off of the highway, but I know that's something way down the road that they're hoping to do. If you want to look in other areas, you have, Columbia, right, going straight south, and those cities, if you go out down the 40 West corridor, down past Kingston Springs and into Dixon, again, it's not that long of a commute, depending on what time of day you're going. So you're seeing a lot of interest in those areas, again, as a delineation of value and transplants being impervious to the optics of maybe what those cities can offer, and they're just looking at affordability.
And Councilmember, one way that Nashville addressed this growth, expanding out from downtown, was with the Choose How You Move program and transit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll say one other thing, just to talk zoning for a second, then I'll go to transit, which is probably 16 years ago, the council member in Antioch rezoned the entire thing multifamily. And that was pretty controversial, but that has led to a lot of the bodies there that then make the retail follow. And then conversely, Whites Creek has worked really hard through the National Next process to ensure that they are down as rural.
Right.
And so they have said, we don't want sewer, we don't want people, and we don't want transit. And so if you want a rural part of Davidson County, that's what you go there for if you can find, a 5-acre farm that you can afford. But, so, I mean, the zoning is definitely, and then the Madison council member in the last term worked really hard on the Madison Station project. They kind of created a sense of place there. That it's been part of that. So all that is to say that, the zoning can lead to what happens. And then with Choose How You Move, we now have a dedicated source of funding, to create safety, security, sidewalks, and service. And so the biggest part of that is increasing the frequency of service so that our bus lines actually function like real buses in real cities, where you don't have to study because it only comes once an hour, and if you miss it by 2 minutes, you are an hour late to work. So now we've got so many buses that are now coming every 15 to 20 minutes, so you can just go to the bus stop and know that it's going to come soon enough to get you where you need to go. and that kind of dependability and frequency and working into the night. So if you're a service worker downtown, you can work, you know, till the 2 a.m. closing and still have a bus to get home on. That's huge. So that whole process of saying, we know now that we can add these new bus routes and add the frequency and the later into the night so that we can attract a whole new class of riders is a really important piece of that. Getting those people to ride the bus is another important piece of that, you know, and y'all talk to lots of people, so feel free to, you know, ensure that people are aware that that option is a much better option than it was 5 years ago, just in terms of dependability. And it's also working on the technical. That's one of the other S's, is just to make the whole signalization process smarter so that you're not sitting at a red light with no one coming in any direction for 2 minutes waiting for it to change. So that requires some infrastructure to be built, and that's happening first on Nolensville Road, but we'll see that in more intersections around town, and that will make the commute part of it better for the rest of us that are still in cars.
And of course, voters chose to increase taxes. And that in liberal Nashville, I can see how that would make an impact, but what about the regional solution there and seeing some of those suburban counties tackle it as well?
I mean, I will say, you know, the previous transit initiative that didn't pass, partly it was because there was this sense that, you know, why in the world do we need all these buses to go up the line and then stop there? And I think that was a misconception, because I think every mayor around us was willing to say, we'll tie into that. You know, if you get a bus that comes reliably, we'll take it from the county line and go from there. And I think we just have to pick that conversation back up again and make those commutes so that, especially, you know, if we end up with choice lanes on 24, the buses will be able to go in those choice lanes. And so, you know, if you can hop on a bus in Murfreesboro and zip down up I-24 going 50, you know, 70 miles an hour when everybody else is at 20 miles an hour, that's, you know.
I'm astonished that, what is it, the Music City Stars? That was
Right, yeah.
I'm astonished at how little that's used. You know, my cousin lives out in Lakeview, and you know, use it to come down and check out the 4th of July fireworks. Popped in, popped out.
It's great.
Popped out, super convenient.
Those who
you know?
use it love it,
Yeah.
but not enough people use it. And some of that is, you know, just getting people to try it, I think, the first time.
Yeah, one of my friends lives in that area as well, and he's a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, but he's been a complete convert on mass transit because of Music City Star, because it does make a difference. So I want to leave a little bit of time if any folks out there have questions, but before we turn it over, I wanted to know, looking forward, just very generally speaking, whether it's metrics or descriptively, what are you looking for, or policy changes, what are you looking for to see our housing market just start to improve a little bit?
It's the way I look at, as I said, you know, so we move from crisis, affordability crisis, to the challenge part, meaning the housing crisis is growing still, but it's not really more than, you know, wages or any other wage growth or any other income related excuse me, elements. Inventory is I think since 2014, this is the highest level here in the region. That means buyers usually have choices. So like a couple of years ago, we had that problem too. You know, they didn't have that kind of thing. So there are many elements. You know, still it's a challenge there, but as you know, it's for the future, collaboration is really critical. And some policy issues like integrating affordability with the transport system and some other regional initiatives maybe. You know, those things gonna affect and solve the problem, and I hope to see those kind of things going on. You know, say in terms of collaboration, government, of course, you know, builders, realtors, you know, they need to really come and think about how to address, you know, the system of housing, rather than just, you know, building a home or the single family in the summer. So that kind of collaboration, as long as you have those elements, and I would, you know, definitely there will be something down the line, you know, it's making certain things affordable.
So I'm going to dream a minute. My metric would be that the people who are working 40 hours a week in a real job that we need, at least 2 of them together can afford to find a place to live in Nashville, in a part of town where they want to live. I think that's what we need to be shooting for.
What a novel concept. You know, again, it's tough, but, you know, I'd like to see more advocacy on all levels, to be honest with you. You know, it's, yeah, you know, we're talking about Nashville, the Greater Nashville market, but, you know, we are lucky to be in this market relative to what's going on in the rest of the nation right now. And so, I'd like to see more programs that help, you know, median income families be able to break through the barrier of affordability in some ways. You know, again, that's probably a pipe dream, but, you know, the association does a good job advocating. Obviously, we have, you know, a national representation when it comes to that. I would love to see, you know, some government involvement when it comes to it. You know, we've seen artificially, you know, lowered interest rates in the past. I'm not saying that is necessarily the solution here, but I think that with certain income qualifications, you know, the banks and government entities should be a little more involved right now with affordability as well.
And maybe the Road to Housing Act will facilitate that.
Just one more thing, it's a shameless promotion, but we have a product, and the web address is mtbci.org, Middle Tennessee Business Confidence Index. You know, so if you are interested in, you know, so we are surveying the local businesses, CEOs actually to get their opinion about the region, economy, you know, and some challenging issues. Please, you know, so if you are interested in, you know, send me email so I can send you an ID and you can fill out the survey. The second quarter is open right now. But we had a question there, you know, about the housing affordability, whether or not actually creating a problem to attract workforce to the region. And only 10% said that's not a big concern and issue. Remaining 90% mentioned that affordability is really big, you know, somewhat affecting to attract people to their business or whatever they are doing in the Nashville area. So it's a critical issue for businesses and of course the families too. So it's just somehow we need to do something collaboratively actually to solve that problem.
Cheers. So does anyone out there have any questions? I think we have about 5 minutes to for our panelists. Yes.
I have a question. I'm on one of the committees here at Greater Nashville REALTORS, and we were talking about affordability, and the conversation went to other states and how some state governments are doing things for affordability. But when we were talking about ideas for Nashville, but, oh, we can't do that here because the state government doesn't allow us to do that. Shouldn't the state government be involved in these discussions or panels or something like that? I know Missouri, the governor just signed something this week, a landmark economic package to redevelop downtown St. Louis. So that was a state initiative. Is there a state something that we can do?
That's a fraught question.
I know, a hand grenade right at you, go ahead.
I mean, I will say the state of California just passed a law that surprised, I think I even learned this, that said if you don't come up with some kind of zoning changes to enable more affordable housing, there is no zoning. You know, people can do whatever they want to. And so in San Francisco, they didn't move fast enough. And so one clever developer came in and said, I'm going to do this. And it's really bigger and very different from anything else. And by then, shortly after that, they got their ducks in a row.
Yeah, Oregon, the state of Oregon, there's no zoning laws in the entire state of Oregon.
And Houston does that.
Yeah. Houston's the same. For the better or worse.
Yeah, and that's debatable. I mean, I will say, I have had someone approach me and say, we've got this great idea for affordability, we're working with the state on it. And I said, oh, really? You know, maybe you could start with Nashville and let us work on it here, because what's good for Nashville may not be good for Ashland City, and you know, it may not be good for Memphis because they're shrinking and we're growing. And there is a movement, there is kind of, you know, a template bill that's moving around that does
Yep.
sort of what we did with our missing middle here, so we've gotten ahead of that. So there is a movement nationwide for states to take on zoning issues, but, I mean, cities are so different. I question the wisdom of trying to tackle it at a state level if you haven't at least worked on it at the city level.
We did have the state pass the bill allowing local governments to use their bonding capacity to address affordable
Correct.
housing.
That's,
And Metro's starting to do that in this budget with a little bit of money.
yeah. So they pass state enabling legislation, we will have to then opt into it, which we're absolutely going to do. So they are beginning to, because it's becoming a statewide problem, they're doing a better job. And you may or may not remember, we worked on the, before attainable housing, we worked on, just sort of automatic, when you build, you need to include inclusionary zoning. And the state immediately preempted us on that and said, you can't do that, you can't mix zoning and affordability for 10 years. So we're moving in the opposite direction. So at least they're creating the option for us to do it at the local level.
Have we had a question on you?
Actually, I don't have a question, but I would, this may not be popular, but I would challenge, you're way smarter than me, Dr. Curry, but I would challenge that it really is a crisis as opposed to a challenge, because I think the part that we're missing is that first-time homebuyers are now in their 40s, and so we're not seeing it yet, but that wealth that many of us had because we bought in our 20s and early 30s, they're going to be impacted. We're just not seeing it yet, so that's the challenge. Yeah, it is a crisis.
Yes, sir.
Kind of going along with that, transit, I'm going to come back to the transit. It's kind of both, but the commuting through the ring out to the outside, you know, we're a big city on regentrification, right? East Nashville, all the inner ring, it looks beautiful, everybody loves it. But the problem is there's a population that used to be there, that worked somewhere, was on a bus line, now no longer can afford to live where a bus line is, but maybe traditionally didn't have a car. And now they're on a system, and our, state politics is really against these systems that help support that family, but we've also caused that family to be in a place where they can't even get to work. So to me, we have so many issues in our country that are city. Sorry, I don't want to get into that conversation at all. But in our city, that just have to do with our middle to lower income population that's really being pushed out and have less access to the things that they need.
Yeah.
So, what is the transit? Because for 10 years of my real estate career, I went to the transit committee meetings, and I just got bored of going and hearing all the same ideas with no action. So I have no idea what it is today. I think, I know the bus lines have improved, but our train ideas have basically disappeared.
Partly it's because CSX doesn't play nicely. They won't share the tracks.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility of one towards Clarksville, because that's another line that we continue to try to pursue. And then basically, what I said, the 4 S's of sickness, safety, service, and I can't remember the other S. But we've made a commitment at this point to focus on our buses and leave the light rail for later. Maybe after we've got a transit-oriented population, they'll be more open to that, then we'll circle back to that. So the closest we'll get to that will be dedicated bus lanes on certain routes. And, even that, I think, will be a change that will come with opinions. But if we can get to a point where your bus is actually going to be able to not get stuck in traffic and move quickly and dependably, then it becomes a slightly better option if it goes where you need it to go. And we are putting in more more crosstown routes, so that you don't have to go downtown to go back out to somewhere else, which is important, and adding the different stations throughout the county. So there's a big one in Clarksville Highway now that will provide more options to do transfers there. So we can talk more offline, but
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Then affordability, we keep talking about that, and often we talk about going smaller, zoning gets smaller. most people, when they're talking about affordability, aren't talking about wanting a smaller house for the same amount of money. That's the reality of our population. Now, we had a little talk here about the cost of construction, right? And some of the regulations we have on construction cause that, right? We have way tighter houses than we used to with all these different things that actually cause some of the issues we have with like radon and all these different things these days because we basically make them encapsulated. Yeah, and it's actually a negative, but we've done it in the hopes of progress. So what are we looking at in things like that where like we can just change construction to be like, what does it need to be solid for 100 years?
So we have done some tweaks on our building code. We changed the multifamily to, or at least the fourplex and the sixplex to single stair as opposed to 2 stairs, just because sometimes it becomes impossible on the lots that we have to build 2 stairs, and the state is supporting that one as well. So there are also, there's a suggestion to move, again, that same size from the international building code to the international residential code if you don't necessarily need sprinklers, if you've only got 6 people in there, so there's some common sense things that we can look at that are being considered. Memphis has done some of those already, so Nashville is looking at it, and I'm hoping to bring some of those. Also just using manufactured housing, because it's not, it's not what it used to be. It's not just, mobile homes that you have to have tires on the roof to keep them from blowing away. So there are some code-related options that I think we're going to see some changes in. So,
We're gonna start 3D printing houses.
Yeah,
But
they said actually they are costing around the same amount of money. In Virginia, said they did several of those homes actually, the same square feet, costing almost around the same. But I would like to say something about the crisis versus challenge. I mean, that's the regional level look at when I say from crisis to challenge. But when you look at certain professions, school teachers, police, firefighters, many retail sector employees, that's been crisis for I don't know how many years. And when you look at also the stock markets, for example, Williamson County, I've been doing some work with them, some time ago, about 10, 15 years ago. We had the same conversation, the crisis conversation that time, because they cannot find people for at the retail level or somehow they have to actually bring from other areas. So it's just like, it's for certain occupation sectors, it's really Christ still there. It's not going to be solved easily.
I think I'm correct that we're at the end of our time, so maybe a little over. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to our panelists. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.